Hello, BookTube. Well, we're back for this impromptu library tour. I'm seated on an easy chair, and we are doing the biography section. They're my favorite kinds of books, and I have a whole wall of biographies. And uh, I have a low bookcase underneath the window here, and on top of those books, I put tons of transverse books over time. I just piled them on there because it's a nice, easy space, and because I'm a book person. We have slowly moved those transverse books off and gone through them together, and now we're in the first shelf, the actual shelf of that bookcase. I'm going to try and power through the whole thing in one video, so that we're not doing biographies until October. So it'd be kind of nice just thematically. I know I started this late and I didn't really plan it, but it'd be kind of nice to do this whole library tour in 2019. So we're gonna try and power through this whole shelf of biographies in one video. So let's see if we can do that. The first one is an oversized trade paperback, and it's an abridgment of a 2-volume biography. I have a weakness for multi-part biographies because I grew up in the Edwardian era, but I don't actually have the 2 volumes of this biography. I kind of wish that I did. It's a great abridgment, but I kind of wish I had the 2 volumes. Next time I see them at the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston, I will grab them. But in the meantime, this will do just fine. This is Robert Hendrickson's The Rise and Fall of Alexander Hamilton. This is his 1-volume, it's a trade paperback, and it's his 1-volume abridgment of his 2-volume life of Alexander Hamilton, which is the best life of Alexander Hamilton that has ever been written, or is ever likely to be written. Not just because of the command of the sources, which, anybody can duplicate if they work hard enough, but the eloquence of the writing. We're going to see that a lot on this shelf. A lot of these books are here because of how beautifully written they are. And I guess I must have just grabbed this. I probably got this year. I must have just grabbed this because I knew as soon as I saw it that I didn't have the 2-volume hard. What I want is the 2-volume hardcovers with dust jackets. That's the obvious thing to have here, not a trade paperback 1-volume abridgment. But it'll do as a placeholder. I've mentioned many times. A lot of times my books are placeholders. They are here to remind me of something that I need to get the next time I see it. Then this next one, oh, okay. Oh, great. This still has the pub sheet in it. This was from well, anyway, the pub sheet, of course, is being cherry, but this is recent. This is A Life of Edward Garnett. This is by Helen Smith, and it's called An Uncommon Reader. There's Wilson Shugart right there. Let me tell you a little here. During the course of a career spanning half a century, Edward Garnett, editor, critic, and reader for hire, would become one of the most influential men of the 20th century English literature. Known for his incisive criticism and unwavering conviction in matters of taste, Garnett was responsible for identifying and nurturing the talents of a generation of the greatest writers in the English language, from Joseph Conrad, nobody's perfect, to John Galsworthy, Henry Green, Edward Thomas, T.H. Lawrence, and D.H. Lawrence, or T.E. Lawrence and D.H. Lawrence. And this is the only biography of him that I've ever read. I don't know if he's ever had another one. Certainly, this was terrific and very, very bookish. And Edward Garnett was a particular literary figure, in a particularly kind of literary figure, tastemaker, a gatekeeper, the first reader for a lot of authors, a discoverer and a true believer of a lot of authors. And believe it or not, this bookshelf has 2 other biographies of people just like that. It's only here. So this next one is not literary. This figure was not a literary figure, but tremendously enjoyable to read about. Really, in a way, a life that capitulates the end of Imperial Britain. This is Philip Ziegler's biography of Lord Mountbatten. And Ziegler, he's come up in this biography shelf tour before. In fact, he probably will again. I think he's a great biographer, just fantastic. And Mountbatten is certainly a great figure to call out the strengths of a good biographer, because he led, as you can tell from that picture, and there are many others like it. This is a very nice, unadorned hardcover. A big life of a man who shaped the monarchy, a man who almost was a king himself, and a man who held the power of a king over India. And the more Ziegler learned about him, he encountered a phenomenon that a lot of people who knew Mountbatten in life also encountered. The more he learned about him, the less he liked him. So that finally he had to tack over. I wonder if the anecdote is right to hand. He had to tack over his workspace a motto to remind himself. Let's see. No, well, it's in here somewhere. He had to tack over his workspace that no matter what his faults, he was a great man. He had to keep reminding himself of that. This is a terrific read, though. In a slightly more generous book organization system, it would be with the royals. It would be with my royal biographies. It might as well be. Then this next one is by Claudia Renton. It is also brand new. I don't know if it has a pub sheet in it or not, but it's from this year or last year. It's those Wild Wyndhams, Three Sisters at the Heart of Power. And it is yet another example of something that we have seen before on this channel, which is a whole book written about the subjects of a John Singer Sargent portrait. I really wish that would take off. I really do. I don't have a copy of Madame X, fantastic book called Madame X, but I had Love Fiercely, and I also don't have. There's a book that is entirely devoted to entirely written about the daughters of Edwy Darley Benoit, one of Sargent's most mysterious and most evocative portraits. This is the same thing, where the author but the author delves into the lives of these three sisters and the world that they lived in. And you could do that with virtually everybody that Sargent did portraits of. They all led fascinating lives. This was terrific. Absolutely terrific. It featured high, if not at the #1 spot, of the most coveted list in the world, in the literary world, the Steve Reed's year-end best and worst list. I think this was on the biography list, and I think it was near the top. This next one is a gem. It is a joy. It is Empress by Ruby Lal, about Nur Jahan, the Mughal Empress Nur Jahan, who did everything in her time period that in the 17th century that no woman was supposed to do. She was wife number 20 to her husband, but it didn't matter. It didn't matter. Her force of personality allowed her to make a huge mark on her world. And this book was terrific. Just, it made you realize the same thing as the Wyndham sisters. It made you realize that in the hands of a really good biographer, the whole world is full of fantastic stories. All you need is the right person to find the fascination and do the work, and bam, you've got a terrific biography. What have we got here? In 1611, 34-year-old Nur Jahan, daughter of a Persian noble and widow of a subversive official, became the 20th and most cherished wife of the Emperor Jahangir. While other wives were secluded behind walls, Nur ruled the vast Mughal Empire alongside her husband and governed in his stead as his health failed and his attention wandered from matters of state. As astute politician and devoted partner, Nur led troops into battle to free Jahangir while he was imprisoned by one of his own officers. She signed and issued imperial orders, and coins of the realm bore her name. And her son-in-law constructed the Taj Mahal. And I had a blast reading this from beginning to end. Just a whole bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of palace intrigues straight out of I, Claudius that I didn't know anything about. Okay, this next one I did know about. Most of these people I knew something about when I read their biographies. I don't usually go in cold like I did with Nur Jahan or the Wyndham sisters. I didn't know a whole lot of details about their lives. But this next figure is Caravaggio. And, you know, if you've done any amount of reading about art history, you'll know a little about Caravaggio, but still, this book was incredible. And I found the UK hardcover. I had the advanced copy, and I had the finished copy in America. But the UK hardcover is much more minimalist in its dust jacket design, and I really like that. It's M by Peter Robb. This is the man who was Caravaggio. And the American dust jacket just has that, and then on the back, a description, a brief description. No blurbs, no nothing like that, just that. This is a big, sumptuous life of Caravaggio, and what it was like to be both gay in his time period and also a homicidal psychopath, and tertiarily a very talented artist. This is just, it's Peter Robb just doing a fantastic job. I don't think I have anything else by Peter Robb, but I go back to this book all the time, either in part or in whole. That's the gold standard for all of these biographies is, do I go back to it? I don't want to own a biography just to have it, just to say that I do. I want to come back to these books, and I do. I come back to these books and study things either in part or in whole, because a good biography will also give you the whole history of the period, so you can easily double it up as history. And I come back to these books, I come back to my Penguin Classics, and I come back to my bookcases of books about books, of book reviews and book essays. And the rest of these things, not so much. A strong argument that they don't need to be here, as heretical as that is. Okay, all right. This one doesn't really belong here. It really belongs, I theoretically, sometimes I try to put American lives together, sometimes I try to put presidential lives together. I don't always succeed. Maybe this will help me. But this is Nigel Hamilton's Reckless Youth, JFK Reckless Youth, all about JFK when he was a beautiful young man. Beautiful and, much to the ire of the Kennedy family, a callow young man. The book has all sorts of stories of intellectual growth and heroism. It has all sorts of stories of promise yet to come. It is not in any way a wrecking ball of a biography, not in any way. But it also portrays the young teenage JFK at his most crass, at his most boorish, at his, it shows the womanizer, aborning. And the Kennedy family didn't like that. This was supposed to be the first volume of a trilogy, and that never happened. And it's terrific reading. Nigel Hamilton is a fantastic writer in a very slangy, very fast-paced way. And this is a JFK book to have, even though it's not, it doesn't have the scholarly gravamen that you might want of a biography of slain U.S. president. It's still, it shows you a JFK, especially a young JFK, that you won't see in any other Kennedy book. So I really ought to see with these things. With the transverse books, I was taking them off the shelf so that I could re-examine them. These things, I'm just putting them back where they went, and that's not good. Because this thing really should be, there's a shelf here that I'm noticing is almost entirely U.S. presidents, and this really should be there. Or we'll deal with it. We'll deal with it when we get to the president's biography. Okay, this next one is fairly new, I think. This is Zbigniew Brzezinski. This is a full-length biography of President Carter's national security advisor. Was the pinnacle of his job description, but he ended up being a foreign policy gray eminence in Washington for a lot of people in a lot of different capacities. And this biography got praised. Is this a translation? Yes, it is. This is by Justin Weiss, and it's translated by Catherine Porter, and it got praised in its original edition, and then, true to form, when it came out in English, the American reviews were not as kind. One high-profile review in particular pretty much soup to nuts damned the book, and I don't agree with that. I thought it was a tremendously good job. About a figure that you won't know. You won't know Brzezinski unless you know your American presidential history. Like, for instance, somewhere in this collection I have a really good biography of President Carter, and Brzezinski's all over the parts of the presidency. Okay, all right. This next one is a poetry biography. It's a great one, and it is another two-parter, and I only have part one, and that has got to change. The next time I see part two, I always do this. I see part one of this two-parter, and I get it, and I read it, and I like it. I reread it, and I like it, and then for some reason I get rid of it. Either I send it to somebody, or I just sell it back, and then I see part two, and I get that, and I put it on the shelf, and I read it, and I reread it, and I go to parts of it again, and I love it, and then I get rid of that. I don't know if there's ever been a time when I've had both of these volumes at the same time, and I want them both. This is R.F. Foster. This is his life of William Butler Yeats. This is the first book, Apprentice Mage, and then there's a black-spined second book that is about the old Yeats, and together they cover his whole life. They are a classic example of a two-volume biography, and I don't know why I don't have the other one. I don't know why I don't have the other one. I think it's called Archmage, and I, I love it. I love them both. So the next time I see that copy on a copy of the Archmage at the Brattle, I will simply grab it, and then I will have them both. Because invariably, when I come to Volume 1, and I look for something, that immediately makes me, I look up some person or some event or some book. That immediately makes me want to read. It reminds me to want to read something in Volume 2 and I don't have it, or vice versa. If it's a time where I have Volume 2 and I don't have Volume 1, I will correct it. Next time I'm at the Brattle, I'm hoping that it will be there. Okay, all right. This is another one of those literary tastemaker biographies. I can't believe there are 3, but there are 3 on this shelf. And this one is Blanche Knopf. This is the lady with the Borzoi, because there she is with one of her Borzoi, and the Borzoi became the emblem for Knopf. I don't know if I'm going to be able to open and show you a picture, but you'll know it's a stylized dog. That is, I wonder if I have it here somewhere. Yes, the Wyndham sisters. That is Blanche Knopf's Borzoi, one of her Borzois. And this is just her story. She was an indefatigable reader. She was a champion of authors. She was a finder of authors. She did a lot to broaden the international base of American readership, tried to get Americans to be more adventurous readers, and just truly engaging biography that I don't know that she would need another one, but I really enjoyed this one. Okay. All right. This is not. All right. This one really doesn't belong here. I don't think. I hate to say that. It belongs somewhere else. This is not technically a biography, although you get pretty much all the biography that you need. This is Margaret Asquith's Diary of the Great War of World War I. Just a big, wonderfully annotated edition from Oxford University Press, and it doesn't really belong here. Margaret Asquith also wrote a great memoir, one of the great 20th century memoirs, and that would belong here. That is also something that I would easily, that's the sort of thing that would turn up at the Brattle. And there's been a great biography of her as well, but her Great War diary does not belong on this shelf. This is terrific, though. Oh my God, what a writer lived in her. Okay, all right, this is the third literary tastemaker biography. This is Robert Gottlieb, Avid Reader. Robert Gottlieb is a poobah at Simon & Schuster. As far as I know, he still is. They may need dynamite to get him out. And he worked with, like Blanche Knopf and like Edward Garnett, he worked with a ton of authors, discovered a ton of authors, encouraged a ton of people, was constantly reading, constantly exploring, constantly talking with people about books, constantly shoring up authors when they had dark nights of the soul, which authors have with depressing regularity. And this is his book. He promised forever and ever that he would write a book, and this is it. And it's one polished, well-thumbed literary world anecdote after another. So it doesn't surprise, and it certainly doesn't scandalize. But it's his literary life told by him. It's not a tell-all. It's not meant to be. What a tell-all he could write. but it was never going to be that, and it's really enjoyable. And if I remember, as usual, I will leave links to all of these things that I might have written about. I believe that I've written about virtually everything that we've talked about so far, with the exception of maybe the Caravaggio book. I know that I reviewed The Lady with the Borzoi. I know that I reviewed Avid Reader. But anyway, well, now we'll move on. This is just a huge full-dress biography of Alexis de Tocqueville by Hugh Brogan. This is just a big, fat life of the guy who wrote Democracy in America, a classic of literature, a classic of nonfiction that you really have to read. It is so good. And this is all the stuff that isn't in that book. This is the life story of that man. And I firmly believe that you cannot read Democracy in America without coming away wanting to know more about de Tocqueville himself. And this book does a great job, just a great job. All right. Oh, fantastic. This is Anne Rowe's life of Perkin Warbeck, the perfect prince, a weird figure in the reign of King Henry VII, who claimed that he was one of the princes in the Tower who survived. He claimed that he was, and got a huge following of people who thought, all right, well, this is the rightful king. Henry VII was a usurper. His crown had no long pedigree. He was not the son of a king. So his rule produced pretenders. It produced, like anyone, going on back to the Roman Empire, whenever you have an imperfect rule, then you have claimants. Claimants will crop up all over the place. And Perkin Warbeck was one of the high-profile ones. Henry VII had two people who claimed their right to the crown more than him. And Perkin Warbeck claimed it because he claimed, I am the son of the king. And at one point he even had the princes in the tower. We'll get to them. Eventually I'll do a video on them. But their mother was alive. She did what she could to save her own skin once once the Game of Thrones reality was clear to her. And at one point she claimed that Perkin Warbeck was indeed her son. And Henry dealt with him in exactly the kind of cold and brainy and merciless way that he dealt with everyone. And this is the full story of Perkin Warbeck. And it's told so wonderful. I think this book did really well. Had lots and lots of paperback reprints and deserved it. This is the story of someone who was not. And it is utterly fascinating. Okay. All right. This came to me out of nowhere. This next book came to me out of nowhere. I did not know that it existed. I did not know. This was when? When was this? 2017. I did not know that it existed. Saw it in no catalogs. Didn't know it was coming. And one day I just opened it. I just opened the mail and there it was. This is by Simon Carey and it's a biography of Lord Lansdowne. The last great Whig. And I loved it. Absolutely loved it. It's a little bit on the dry side, but so thoroughly detailed about Lansdowne, who was a huge figure in his own day. He's forgotten now, except as the name of a street here in Boston. But let's see here. A remarkable figure of British politics between the late Victorian and interwar years, Lord Lansdowne was among the last hereditary aristocrats to wield power by birth. Over the course of a distinguished 50-year career, he served as Governor-General of Canada, Viceroy of India, Secretary of State for War, Foreign Secretary, and the Leader of the House of Lords. And this just tells his story and does it really well in a very reserved way, but I loved it. And I admit, in a childish fashion, there was an extra burnish of excitement over the fact that I didn't see it coming. Okay, all right. This next is not a biography in two parts. It is a trilogy. And it's a trilogy with a long and storied history behind it that, again, I will get to. The story of the Kafka papers. It's been written about. It's had 2 books written about it, and it deserves them because it's a fascinating story in its own right. But this is Rainer Stark's biography of Franz Kafka in 3 volumes. So you have the Years of Insight, you have the early years. I have both of those in hardcover, and then for some reason, the Decisive Years I have in paperback. This is Shelley Frisch's translation of a 3-volume biography of Franz Kafka that is incredible. Just incredible. Talk about that point I mentioned earlier about these things being here because of their eloquence. Of course, Kafka has not wanted for biographies, but these books are amazingly written. Such elegant sympathy with him and such an exhaustive knowledge of his life and letters and manifestos and books. I really wish that I had the Decisive Years in a hardcover. I'm sure that I will see it eventually, and I did have it at one point. But I go back to these. These are the only Kafka. This is the only Kafka biography that I have. It's the only Kafka biography that you need. These 3 books. 3 books for such a young life. But boy, oh boy, you never feel like the author's wasting your time. That's for sure. All right, this is going to start to get dicey because the camera is sitting on these books. Some of them go right underneath the camera, so we're going to have to work this out. Let's see here. This next one you've seen. It's just recent. I just found it recently. I loved it when it first came out, and I don't know why I got rid of my copy. This is by Ruth Scurer, and it is John Aubrey, My Own Life, in which the author takes an unconventional approach to the biographer John Aubrey, whose book, his book of lives, is well worth your time to read. It's an amazing, weird collection of biographical tidbits. But this is her. Ruth Scurer reconstitutes John Aubrey's life as though he were writing it himself. And he never actually, that we know, did that. But as a result, this is a totally unconventional biography. And that worried me, because I don't like unconventional things. But boy, oh boy, she carries it off. This is just terrific. Just terrific. All about Aubrey's life and times. We got to be careful here so we don't destroy everything. We're doing fine. This next one is also a fairly recent acquisition of something that I loved when it first came out. This is The Adventures of Sir Thomas Browne in the 21st Century. This is about the author of Religio Medici, and it's his life story, but it's also the reception history of his book, of his literary history. He's not known now outside of literary circles, so I don't know how to recommend his most famous book. I don't really know how to do that, but I definitely recommend this book. You don't need to know anything about him to like this book. It's a little abstruse. They both are. John Aubrey and him are a little abstruse. Okay, this next one we go back to American history. How are we going to do this without causing a destruction? This is a fantastic book and an anomaly, a weird anomaly of a thing. I would never in a million years have thought that anyone would write this biography. I didn't think there was enough material. But all it takes is like I said, all it takes is the right biographer, the right person in sympathy with the subject. This is by Carol Bundy, and it's called The Nature of Sacrifice. And it is a biography of Charles Russell Lowell Jr., who died as a young man during the American Civil War at the Battle of Cedar Creek. That's him. He was at the center of a large circle of young men, all of whom were friends, all of whom had a dash that would be difficult to explain in our post-heroic age. It would be difficult to explain the absolute certainty with which so many of his classmates and friends looked at the prospect that he would be president one day. They were certain that either he would be or that someone in their circle would be. And most of them didn't live. Most of them were cut down. And he was the most promising of them all, the most interesting of them all. I knew of his life from his fathers and grandfathers, whose lives I know extremely well and whose biographies I have read exhaustively. But it never occurred to me that he could support a whole biography of his own. And yet, not only does that happen, but this is beautiful. It's a beautiful tribute. I don't know. Again, these things are... Most of these books put me in an odd position of wanting to recommend them, but I don't know how I would do that. I'm not sure that Carol Bundy actually introduces Charles Russell Lowell as well as she celebrates him. So I'm not sure that you could just pick up this book if you were, say, interested in learning more about American history and 19th century American history. I'm not sure that you could pick this book up and enjoy it. So I'm in the weird position here of singing its praises without technically being able to recommend it. I mean, on this shelf, what could I actually recommend? I could recommend the de Tocqueville biography, definitely. And if you're interested in the world of American letters, if, for instance, you're in the publishing industry or you want to be, then I can recommend Robert Gottlieb's book, Avid Reader, absolutely. And Blanchnov, the same way. See, Foster's Life of Yeats, I don't know. It's 2 volumes. It's incredibly detailed. It's a big undertaking if you don't know anything or care anything about Yeats to begin with. It's not going to make you care about him. JFK Reckless Youth absolutely will pull you right in. Hamilton is, in terms of immediate readability, he's the best author we've seen so far on this shelf. But you'll mostly be getting JFK's callow youth. The one incident that you'll get to and that you'll read just with holding your breath the whole time will be the part where his callow youth ended, where his ship was struck and his men went into the water and he had to save their lives. That is when the callow youth of JFK stopped, and that's in there and it's told wonderfully. And maybe the Peter Robb. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. My point is, this is terrific. If you are already interested in the subject of the American Civil War, or the 19th century American intellectual life, or if you know any of the Russell Lowells before Charles, then that's a very big if. I do recommend it. I just don't know who I would recommend it to. And this next one, ooh, are we gonna do this? Ooh. This next one is huge, and it is absolutely definitive, like the Reiner Stock. It is absolutely definitive on its subject, just and beautifully written from beginning to end. I was overjoyed when I found it. This is J.C. Beaglehole's big, enormous life of Captain Cook. Just the final word on the subject, just the final word. This is so amazingly good, even from his youth, which was kind of boring, all the way to a life of adventure that puts most nautical fiction to shame. And again, you would have to be interested. Obviously, you're not going to do a 1,000-page biography of this guy if you're not interested in him, but you'd have to be really interested. And I'm not sure, it's tough for me to really step back and know, but I'm not sure that Beaglehole really grounds the subject completely. I'm not sure that this is an entry point if you want to read about Captain Cook. As amazing as that is, I don't know that it is. But the last word on the subject, all subsequent biographies of Captain Cook, you read them and you look at the end notes, and Beaglehole is just all over them. They're heavily leaning on his book, and well, they should, because this is it's a masterpiece of biography. Okay, these next three, we're almost done. These next three are all Benjamin Franklin biographies. This is Ronald Clark's one-volume biography that is really good, one of the best one-volume biographies of Franklin. He's had a million of them. I think this is probably my favorite one. Here, let's move this. Let's do this. Can we? There we go. Then the next two are Franklin biographies, but they are keyhole things. They are not the whole life. This one is this is fantastic. This is the Boston years of Benjamin Franklin, who of course is a son of Boston and was the 10th son of a candle chandler. And this covers that, and because, as obviously you can tell from the size, because Franklin left, as you know, if you've read his famous book, his famous autobiography, he left Boston fairly early in his life to seek his fortune elsewhere, in Philadelphia and elsewhere. So this is in large part a portrait of Boston, of the Boston of Franklin's years. I think that might be why I love it so much. But it's also everything you want to know about the young Franklin. And then this next one is the same thing. It is this is so good. This is just so fantastic. This is David Schonbrun. This is Triumph in Paris. This is the overseas exploits of Benjamin Franklin. So again, a keyhole biography, not the whole life, but just one part of the life. But boy, oh boy, this and the Boston years are my two favorite keyhole lives of Benjamin Franklin. And then here, this is a little bit of a challenge. I'm not going to show you both of these because you have an imagination. You're not a child. This next one is Herschel Parker, and it's another two-volume. We're going to end with roughly end with a two-volume biography, just like I would have liked to start if I had the two-volume Hendricks and Alexander Hamilton. This is Herschel Parker's two-volume biography of Herman Melville. Both of them are huge. Both of them are 800 pages. And it's, again, like the Reiner Stock, this is beautifully in tune with the author. It's beautifully written, powerfully researched, but it's also that this Herschel Parker cares about Melville and digs into every incident. And there is no incident that is too small. That's one of the reasons why when you get an author who's eloquent and who's also on the right wavelength with the author, you really want multiple volumes. See, I do anyway. You don't want that if an author is just doing his job. But if it's if it's what the Regency era referred to as a love match, then you want as much of it as possible. Then if there was a land deal, in one particular year that went poorly for Melville, you want Herschel Parker to write about it for 100 pages. You just do. And so that's why I have both volumes here. And then the last thing on this list, so this was 30 minutes long, but we got the whole shelf done, so we'll move on to the next shelf. This one, it was brand new. You just saw it on this channel. This is Elizabeth Goldring's biography of Nicholas Hilliard, the great miniaturist artist of the Elizabethan period. And this is, it's everything that you want to know about Hilliard's life, but it's also full-color reproductions of not only all of his artwork, but of all of the artwork of his period. That was just around him, that was in the air, or that captures the people that he knew. And stuck on top of it was the TLS review of this book, which will now go inside it. I didn't want to go to the bother of moving it, but now that I have it here, I can just finish that, because that's what I do now. I used to have a folder of saved reviews that I never looked at, and then I realized no, the reviews I look at are the ones in books. So I just went through that. I went through all of my papers, all of my files, took out all of the book reviews, and if it was a book review of a book that I don't have anymore, or that I didn't want, or that whatever, then I threw it away. I just threw away a garbage bag full of old paperwork like that. And if it was a review of a book like The Perfect Prince or the de Tocqueville, then I folded up neatly and put it in the book. so that I know where it is and so that I'm going to encounter it every time I open the book. That has worked really well. That has reduced me from a filing cabinet, a full-size Persenheim filing cabinet, to one little box of papers. That is great. That is a great feeling. Also, it works just in general. Like, for instance, what's a good example? The Caravaggio book. Not just an excuse to show you this cover again. But the Caravaggio book, not only would I put reviews of Rob's biography of Caravaggio in that book, but also anything else, any other piece of periodical writing from the London Review or the TLS or whatever that's about Caravaggio, but it isn't about that book, could still go in there. It becomes a catch-all for all of my periodical writing about, so that it doesn't have to go in a folder that I'm never going to look at, or that I'm not going to be able to find. This way, if I read a review or a new essay about whoever, Bella Abzug has a new book coming out, I'll know exactly where to go on my biography shelf to get all of the writing that I have on that in addition to the biography. So anyway, digressions like that are what are making these videos too long. So we're going to stop this. 35 minutes, good Lord. But we're done. We did a whole shelf. So tomorrow or the next day or whenever I bloody well feel like it, we'll do the next shelf, a whole shelf, and see how that goes. Thank you, BookTube.